it might be a bit of a strange idea and hard to grasp, the concept of a realm, a dimension that is formless, because it must be some kind of empty space that seems to have a boundary to it, but no form, just some kind of abstract template, almost like the concept of a number which is not assigned to any particular object or subject. It's just like an archetype for counting. So these formless heavens can be hard to grasp because, I mean, they exist, but there's no form. Perhaps they're like archetypes of dimensions that just don't have form within them. Just these empty places, these empty spaces. So this represents an exceptionally lofty, a very challenging, a very abstract and refined level of consciousness. And I believe it's the Bodhisattva who mastered these non-physical types of contemplation, these formless attainments on his path during his meditations. So in the suttas, it's documented that the Bodhisattva himself, the Buddha, he mastered these non-physical, very abstract, formless attainments on his path. And achieving these expertise in those meditations this was an extremely advanced achievement. So it truly highlights the brilliance of Gautama. He was capable of reaching these heights, and while his mentor at the time actually lauded him and praised him for reaching what he believed was, what the teacher believed was the ultimate goal, that there was nothing beyond these realms. Even Gautama himself was aware that even these extremely unfathomable and almost imperceptible realms, almost non-existent realms, are still part of samsara, of conditioned existence. And yet probably almost anyone else would have simply accepted this as the final destination because of how subtle they are, because of how empty they are. So these states they appear to be almost conceptual, entirely conceptual. We can't really understand them in the sensual way or in a tangible way. There's no solid imagery to find there. You only encounter what seem to be, primordial thoughts, these potentials of consciousness, these potentialities or archetypes perhaps of thought and archetypes of ideas and emotions, maybe just flickers and sparks of consciousness that haven't even manifested yet. Primordial sparks of consciousness, proto-thoughts. And so they're difficult to seize. So if you examine the meaning by identifying the formless meditations, well, they consist of the level of infinite space, and then it goes to infinite consciousness, then the dimension of, infinite void, or emptiness, and the last one, which is known as the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception. So Now, the way they teach this, the way the scriptures teach this for practicing the formless attainments is you visualize something like you visualize a circle, some kind of sphere or circle. I guess it's more like a circle, like a rip in time or time space, some kind of space, and then you let it expand. You try to go into this empty space and you expand it. So there are specific methods the Buddha provided for that process, actually. The core strategy, so it involves stripping away the physical world. You start with a practice called kasina. So you focus on the circle and then you expand it in your mind until you're able to immerse yourself with what lies beyond it. So the space expands and expands, or perhaps you go smaller and smaller and you go deeper and deeper into this hole, which appears small. Maybe conceptually you imagine that it's actually far away, and you go closer and closer to it and it just becomes absolutely massive, just infinitely large, and you get completely consumed. You turn into a grain of sand in this immense space. And then you remove the color or the material or the circle entirely, and you stay there and you focus in this area. You just immerse yourself in this emptiness. So it can be a bit taxing to conceptualize this and to practice this. So it might be good that he mentioned that it's abstract thought, because it may not be really a skill that everyone possesses naturally. Because in modern day, we're very used to this type of thinking. When we teach math to kids, as I mentioned, we use tangible examples that are understandable. It may not be easy to just say that certain numbers, if you add them up, they equal other numbers, because we have to also understand, we first need to know what numbers are. We have to understand that the concept of numbers is not tangible. They're just like templates that symbolize like value and quantity, basically. So you start with using certain objects, tangible objects like fruit and vegetables and things and cars or whatever it is, and you say, this many fruits, this many oranges equals plus this many oranges equals that many altogether. 3 plus 3 oranges plus 3 apples equals 6 fruits. And eventually you get used to that, and those tangible items can disappear. And now finally we understand these intangible templates or concepts. So we're left with the numbers alone. And that feels perfectly logical to us. Numbers, right? Even though we're not discussing the physical thing anymore. So we're starting to engage in a non-material principle this way. And this is essentially what Buddhism wants you to do with the concept of space. And this can resemble the idealism found in Plato's philosophy, actually, because the concept of space itself is actually quite sophisticated. Early Buddhist schools debated its exact meaning. The Sarvasta, or the Sarvastivada group, viewed space as an unconditional reality, similar to nirvana. So this shunyata, this emptiness, is outside of the realm of existence. So they considered it's considered one of the 3 a certain form of space, the ultimate space, is considered three eternal aspects or principles of existence. You have karma, which is always there, nirvana, the highest nirvana, which is always existing, and space. So like emptiness, it's always there as like the canvas of the universe. So in the Theravada school, however, it maintains that only nirvana is truly unconditioned, and it must mean the highest nirvana, the true ultimate nirvana, not, none of the form heavens or the sensual realms, but ultimate nirvana, or nibbana in Theravada. So they defined three specific. So because of this, though, they had to define three specific types of space. The first is produced space, which occurs when you dig a pit or build a room. And then there's the second type, which is meditative space. So I guess the first type is kind of physical, and in some way it has form to it, and it's and you have to create it as well. You create that space. Then there's meditative space, which appears when you remove it appears when you practice creating space in your mind, such as in Kasina, where you remove that sphere, or you enter the sphere and it gets so big that you no longer see it. You just go into this, you enter this space. And the third is abstract space. And this allows us to perceive distance between objects separated by many, kilometers or miles, separated by that proximity. And which to me sounds just like the same thing as created space, except it's been created by someone else. So I don't know what's the difference here. But of those three, only the first is considered a conditioned reality, because we create it by moving things. We have to move elements. We have to rearrange elements. Whereas the other two are viewed as conceptual conventions, and they're kind of have to move them around too, but it's happening mentally. It's happening at a higher plane. It's happening in the mental world. And so they're perceived as, or considered, conceptual conventions rather than physical truths. So it's fascinating to see this kind of logical analysis appearing so early in the Eastern traditions. In Western thought, that realization that words don't always represent a physical object didn't really take hold until much later with figures like Wittgenstein. So it's remarkable. By lingering on this meditation of space, a person would eventually be reborn, for lack of a better word, in this formless dimension. So it's evident that if you're envisioning these entities that persist here for vast epochs or eons, entirely devoid of physical bodies, that is a very powerful meditation in itself. It serves as a practical exercise for distinguishing the mind from the body, and nearly every other corner of the cycle of rebirth, whether as a person, a creature, or a lower god, the spirit is tied to a body. It's always associated with some kind of a vehicle. So it can be a struggle to really separate these things. We're so used to having some kind of form that's sort of interfacing form that allows the consciousness to really roam around and explore. So identifying the difference is a major realization, but there are a couple specific scenarios where the spirit exists without a body. So the first is the fleeting interval between death and the subsequent rebirth. And the second is when the mind manifests in this formless realm without any material foundation. So it's an incredibly subtle and challenging idea. Even in the past, the later schools of thought tried to qualify this by suggesting that a ghost-like or subtle body must still remain somehow. But it wasn't the aim of the early scriptures. The original texts are very firm that this is a for aggregate existence. And as a result, no physical shapes remain. There's only the presence of sensations and perceptions and mental constructs. So imagine how that would feel during contemplation. I don't know, maybe it would be like watching TV kind of, where you're so immersed in the TV that you don't really, have any more awareness of your body or sitting in the couch or your room. Your existence is just whatever you see on the screen. And I think we do have some idea of what this would be like, because so many of our dreams, often our dreams will just be taken over by these visions where we see things happening. We see things happening, but we don't see our body. We don't feel like we're standing or sitting anywhere. We're not breathing. We don't feel that either. We just are this, for some time, find ourselves kind of like a floating mind. Now, if we move on to the concept of infinite consciousness, this is even more difficult to seize than the idea of space. Because so boundless space still retains a very thin thread to the physical world, because space is a concept defined by the objects within it. And when you strip away that space, if you strip away that space itself, then what remains is the awareness that was once filling it. So you have to remove the container, basically. And if you remove that container, you are just left with awareness alone. And this is where it gets very, it just becomes kind of unimaginable. So we're not describing something that stretches out across a distance. We're not describing a canvas or a grid system, a field even. It's just awareness without limits. And there is no boundary, and it can't be found in any specific spot. There are no coordinates. There are no walls. It's not shaped like a donut as far as we know, or a sphere. And so position, location are qualities that belong to the world of space, right, and form. And now, let's talk about the duration, the lifespan in these dimensions. The time spent here, it certainly increases as you ascend the tiers or the levels. This is no surprise. And these spans are calculated in the thousands of cosmic cycles. I guess these would be cosmic days, or even great cosmic days. Every higher level grants a longer existence than the one before it. And we were discussing just unfathomable, staggering stretches of time, eternities. You know, these were entire solar systems and no, more than that, galaxies, world systems, these what's the word for the world system? You know, the Mount Cinerus with the 4 continents, just these universes, you know, emerging and falling, emerging and fading away thousands of times over. And meanwhile, the beings living in these formless states continue. They persist here. It's part of their life cycle. See the world systems rise and fall, or to at least be there, to be present as these universes come and go. And they do so in this body, these gods, these conscious entities up here are doing so in a bodiless state. In our current era, we might describe this as something like 10 to the power of 30, or by adding endless zeros, endless rows of zeros to a number. So we simply cannot grasp these immense figures. They're astronomical. Now, there is a bit more to explain about these realms, and because as subtle as they are, they're surpassed by the next stage, and this is known as the level of nothingness. It's called, in Pali, it's called Akincannayatana. And this literally means no thingness. Even the idea of awareness itself falls away. And this is far more thin and vacant condition. It is a vast hollow. And there is absolutely nothing you can identify there. So what happens, though, is eventually even that void feels too active. It's like minimalism pushed to its absolute edge. And so therefore, the subsequent stage is labeled as neither perception nor non-perception. So I hope this is followable here, because maybe it sounded like I was talking about a stage beyond this, but we're getting into the non-perception levels here. So the name almost feels like a reach for words. I mean, it's so delicate that it defies a label. We just don't have ways to describe it very well. And it sounds like a contradiction. It's not quite perception because the distinction between the observer and the observed is no longer there. There's no distinct observer or observed thing. That's very strange to think about. And yet, it's not a total lack of perception altogether, because it's not a dark void or a state of nothingness. You don't completely black out. There's something there. There's some awareness there, I guess. But it's not even awareness anymore. It's hard to explain. There's just barely enough awareness to know that you're present in it. It's a very faint recognition. And there are a few delightful analogies to clarify this concept of being neither perceiving and neither non-existent or non-perceiving. And both of these analogies involve a senior monk and a student walking for alms round, I guess. In the first story, the student notices the monk is about to step into a shallow pool, and he alerts him that there's water ahead. So the monk suggests that if there's water, the student should use it to top off his drinking jug. But the student then clarifies that there is actually no water. And the second tale is quite similar. So someone wants to offer clarified butter, but the student notes to the monk that the monk's bowl is unusable. And the monk says, "Sure, let's top up this bowl with some good ghee or butter, some healthy fats, basically." So the student points out that there is oil on the surface because the monk greased the wood, the wood of his wood bowl, I guess, in this case, or wood container, to preserve it. So when the monk asks to have his oil container filled, the student explains that there is no oil. So this, I guess, is their method of illustrating the smallest traces of things, where, you know, at one perspective, there is something, but at another scale, essentially, no, it's not there, it's not perceptible, it's not usable, it's not practical, or certain beings can't see it or understand it. So, you know, it's like when there's something there that technically exists, but relatively speaking, it's not there, it's not usable, or it's not perceptible. And even in our language, we struggle to describe things that lack substance but leave some kind of tiny residue. So you can view this state as the absolute minimum of worldly existence. It is the most subtle and fragile form of conditionality. So we have to ask if any sensation remains at this point. The other mental components are present, but the sensation is strictly balanced. There is no delight nor misery. There is pure tranquility. Every state from the fourth meditation onward is defined by this neutral feeling. And it's not the tranquility of rapture or the second jhana, it's much more beyond that. It's like samadhi, but it's I guess, very deep into samadhi. It's a neutral feeling, but it's a state of happiness, of course. And so you may wonder about the function of mental formations here. Do beings that exist here only exist as a mind for millions of years? And do they really think? I know they certainly don't think like they do on the mental plane. They don't calculate with numbers or analyze or compare things, because verbal thought and active ideation has totally vanished by the second jhana. So it seems to be a lingering effect of previous. Yeah, I mean, what's going on here is just concepts and proto-thoughts, basically, sparks of consciousness. And how these beings get here, it seems to be a lingering effect of previous will and practice. That state, if mastered in previous lives, of course, it persists. And it continues to persist until the karma is spent. And then the being emerges in somewhere else. And it's difficult to conceive this as being experienced as an event. But yet a neutral feeling does endure when you're in there. So these are very complicated, very sophisticated and abstract concepts. By the time we reach this final dimension, the time frames are inconceivable. They're ineffable. And you might wonder if this is a favorable destination from the Buddhist perspective, because ultimately we want to know what leads to lasting happiness. Or if this, massive duration is just a drawback, because in the grand scale of infinite rebirths, the length of time is not really the problem or the issue. But however, it is viewed as a beneficial and good birth because it's free from pain. But however, you might remain there for 8,000 cosmic days, or maybe even great cosmic days, and then eventually have to start your journey again. You can't stay there forever, that's for sure, because it's within existence. And if you're not doing anything there, then you're just going to exhaust your time there. If you're not perpetuating, if you're not working, right? You have to work for everything. So if you're not working there, eventually you'll go back. And so if you emerge during, that's the problem, right? Because if you get reborn, or if you arrive here in a time without the Buddha, without a Buddha period, you'll potentially lose the chance for liberation. So there's actually a story about a wise man who predicted the infant Bodhisattva would become a Buddha. And he didn't survive, the old man didn't survive to see that day. So he entered the formless realms and missed that opportunity. And he felt a deep sense of loss because, so it can be a missed chance to be absent when the truth is being taught. And so this serves as a critique of these formless states discovered before the Buddha's time. The narrative suggests that the Buddha mastered these levels and found them, insufficient before his own realization. Because he also recalls that moment from his youth where he entered into the first jhana. And you might assume that to reach the formless stage, a person must first understand the realms of form. But he doesn't cite this formal training. He points back to that childhood meditative event. So it kind of creates a challenging point in the narrative that requires some interpretation. If you consider this, it represents kind of a difficult junction in the scriptures. One theory is that the state of jhana is actually better suited for prepping the mind to realize liberation or enlightenment, because the formless realms, the formless levels might be too ethereal, and in a sense they are too similar to the ultimate goal, and they can be misleading and leaving the practitioner with no, and once you're there, you might think that there's nothing left, right? But you have no leverage or material to work with. You're not doing anything there, probably. While in contrast, while practicing jhana, the mind retains the ability to hold a specific focus. And you can continue working too. And it also seems plausible that a person could skip the levels of form and go directly to the formless states. So I suspect that a rigid sequential order is not strictly mandatory. You can jump into these states by accident or with but more so with practice. So these points remain largely theoretical, and I won't attempt to reach a final verdict in this talk here, but instead we can provide people with concepts to think about, contemplate. There are many intense perspectives on the worth of these states. Practitioners and teachers suggest ignoring them entirely to focus purely on insight. And then this raises the question, must every, liberated being reach the formless state? But they clearly state that they do not have to. It's not a requirement. So a principle in the higher teaching suggests that some level of jhana is needed to realize the path and its fruits. You need that concentration. So jhana is necessary. It's for training concentration, and it leads to samadhi. And you can keep working. So the Buddha briefly mentions the concept of dry insight without elaborating much on it, though. And usually when he describes the journey, it involves the 4 jhanas followed by awakening. In more recent times, specifically in Burma, the schools of pure insight meditation, these have emerged, and when you look at their underlying theory, they still acknowledge that jhana must be present. But they label it as momentary jhana, actually. They claim the moment of breakthrough possesses the same intensity as a jhana state. So this is a very fascinating topic that sits slightly outside the cosmic focus of the cosmology and all that, but perhaps we can explore the higher teachings further in the future, because the value of the formless states is that they open the spirit to the concept of emptiness and infinite space, the ability to distinguish the mind from the body. So mastery of these levels is extremely rare, but a dedicated meditator can catch a glimpse of them by practicing the established methods. Now, in the shorter discussion, or rather a discourse on emptiness, the Buddha describes a path of progression that capable students can follow. You begin with your current reality, such as the perspective of being in a village or your town, somewhere on the street, and in your mind you strip away every man-made structure until only nature remains, which is the perception of a forest. And then you remove all the living creatures and you remove all the organic aspects of it, the trees and the bushes, the leaves, the grass and all that, until just the raw earth is left. And then you subtract the earth until only space remains. And by dissolving the limits of that space, that's how it becomes boundless. And from that point, your awareness fills that infinite void. And if you stop focusing on the space itself, then you are left with infinite consciousness. And if you then turn away from that consciousness, you suddenly arrive at nothingness. And from there, you can attempt the final delicate move of letting go of the concept of nothingness itself. And this is a pretty excellent way that it's explained. It's incredible. I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like to do this. It's clear as this is as clear as we can make it. So encountering these topics in books, it often leaves us in a bit of confusion, but certain descriptions are helpful for understanding this approach and the mystery, this mysterious concept of existing within a disembodied mind in an infinite space that is not even space anymore. Just a infinite nothingness.